She looked at me like I was a child clinging to a fantasy. Then she laughed, loud, pointed, cruel. You're just a housewife. Stick to laundry. That laugh followed me home, but so did something else. A fire. My name is Caroline Moore, and for most of my adult life, my job description could be boiled down to one line: stay-at-home wife and mom. I never hated that. In fact, I loved the rhythm of it. Morning coffee, school lunches, weekend casseroles, and handwritten grocery lists. There was comfort in the routine. Order, love. But what people don't understand is that comfort doesn't mean complacency. And I think that's where Nina, my husband's co-worker's wife, got it twisted. She was sleek, corporate, sharp as a razor in her tone and her wardrobe, vice president of something I never fully caught, always talking fast, always networking, always watching me like I was something mildly amusing or mildly tragic. I first met her at a fundraiser for my husband's company. It was one of those rooftop cocktail events with tiny name tags, lukewarm hors d'oeuvres, and people pretending they weren't checking each other's shoes. I was wearing a simple navy dress I'd pulled from the back of my closet and clutching my homemade lemon bars wrapped neatly in foil because I thought they might be a nice touch. Nina took one look at the foil and smirked. "How domestic," she said, turning back to the group of wives she'd been performing for. I smiled. I'm used to being underestimated, but the moment that truly changed everything came 2 weeks later. It was my husband's 45th birthday. We were hosting a small dinner at our home, nothing extravagant, just family and a few of his work friends. I'd been planning it for weeks. I even made handmade place cards, cooked a 6-course meal from scratch, every recipe my own. The night was going well until someone complimented the lamb and asked where I'd learned to cook like that. Before I could answer, Nina piped up, wine glass in hand, lips already curled into a grin. "Oh, please," she said, loud enough to cut through the conversation. "She's just a housewife. What else would she be good at?" Silence, a ripple of awkward laughter. Some eyes dropped to their plates. Others looked at me like they expected me to laugh along too. I didn't. I stood there, holding the serving dish, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own voice when I replied softly, "You'd be surprised what housewives can do." She tilted her glass in my direction like it was a game. "Well, if you ever write a cookbook, I'll be sure to skim it for meatloaf tips." That night, after everyone left, I sat at the kitchen counter in the dim light and stared at my recipe journal. Pages and pages of handwritten notes, smudged with flour and splashes of sauce, dishes I'd perfected over decades, stories scribbled beside ingredients, adjustments, lessons, love, and I realized something. I wasn't just a housewife. I was a storyteller, a builder of comfort, a preserver of memory through food, and if Nina wanted a cookbook, she was going to get one. I wiped my hands clean, flipped open a new page, and wrote 4 words at the top. "You're just a housewife." That was going to be the title. And it was going to hurt, in the best way. The next morning, the house was still quiet when I sat down at the kitchen table with my journal, a hot cup of coffee, and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I stared at that title, "You're just a housewife," written in bold ink, and felt a flicker of electricity course through me. This wasn't just going to be a collection of recipes. This was going to be a reclamation. Each dish would carry a story. Each story, a piece of me that had been dismissed, overlooked, or flattened into something cute and convenient. But where do you begin a cookbook when you've never written one before? I had no agent, no publisher, no platform, just grease-stained pages and memories, but I had time. And more importantly, I had the why. And I've always believed that a strong why can move mountains. So I made a plan. Mornings were for writing. I'd drop the kids at school, tidy the house, then sit at the table and pour the past into pages. Afternoons were for testing, filling the kitchen with the scent of cinnamon, garlic, browned butter, lemon zest. Nights? Nights were for dreaming. I'd sit with a glass of wine and imagine the cover, the title. The day someone picked it up from a shelf and said, "She did it." I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even my husband, James. He'd been kind over the years, supportive in his way, but also used to my staying in the background. I didn't want polite encouragement. I wanted to build something silently, steadily, and let the results speak for themselves. Over the next few weeks, I compiled chapters, recipes that raised children, comfort food for broken days, holiday magic on a budget, meals that saved my marriage. Each one carried emotion. I wrote about the first pot roast I made that burned beyond recognition, about the time I fed 12 people with a single box of pasta and 2 cans of diced tomatoes, about my daughter getting her heart broken and how biscuits with honey helped her cry it out in peace. But something deeper happened, too. As I wrote, I started remembering myself, not just as a cook, but as a woman who had survived miscarriages, anxiety, financial struggles, and isolation with nothing but her apron and her instincts. Food had always been my language of love. Now it became my language of truth. Still, doubt crept in sometimes. Was it silly? Self-indulgent? Who was I to write a book? Then, one afternoon, I stumbled upon a blog post titled, "How to Self-Publish Your Cookbook." It was like someone lit a match under me. I clicked every link, read every step, ordered a beginner's guide, watched tutorials, took notes like I was back in school. That night, I opened a new Word document and began typing Chapter 1. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was doing it anyway. Days turned into weeks. Some mornings, I didn't even change out of my pajamas before typing 3,000 words. My hands would cramp. My back would ache. I stopped baking for fun. Everything became a test, a photo, a recipe that needed exacting measurements. But it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like rebirth. I didn't care how long it took, because this wasn't just about Nina anymore. This was about every woman who'd ever been told she was just anything, just a mom, just a housewife, just a helper, just invisible. We were never just anything. We were the backbone, and I was about to write us into the spotlight. By the time fall rolled around, my living room had transformed into a makeshift editorial cave. Sticky notes covered the walls in bursts of yellow and pink. Index cards were scattered across the coffee table like confetti from a very quiet, very focused party. Printed recipes littered every surface, and I was exhausted in the best possible way. I'd typed over 60,000 words, edited every recipe 3 times, tested every dish 5, photographed each one in the soft morning light beside the kitchen window, using a borrowed camera and a stack of old cutting boards as backdrops. And then, finally, after one long weekend of combing through the manuscript, I clicked save on the final draft. I cried. Not because it was perfect, but because it was done. I had turned every whispered slight, every dismissed idea, every roll of Nina's eyes into something real, tangible, bound by my own hands. But now came the terrifying part, putting it out into the world. I started small. I uploaded it to a self-publishing platform. No fanfare, no announcement. I didn't even tell James. I designed a humble cover using Canva, just a wooden table, a bowl of soup, and the title in bold white letters, "You're Just a Housewife," by Caroline Moore. I stared at the publish button for almost an hour. Then I clicked it. Nothing happened at first. A few downloads, a nice comment from someone who said her grandmother used to make the same sugar cookies. That was enough for me. But then, something unexpected happened. One evening, I got an email from a woman named Rachel in Ohio. She'd found my book through a Facebook group for budget cooking. Her message read, "This made me cry. I've never seen my life written down before. You didn't just give me recipes, you gave me back." I read that email 6 times, and then I exhaled. She got it. Within a week, more messages came, then more reviews. Then a cooking blogger with 80,000 followers shared my book, calling it part cookbook, part diary, all heart. Sales trickled in, not in a tidal wave, but steadily. The kind of momentum you can't fake, the kind of growth that doesn't make headlines, until one day it does. I was in the laundry room folding towels when my daughter Ava screamed from the hallway, "Mom, you're on the list!" "What list?" I called out, half laughing. She came barreling in, holding her phone like a trophy. "The New York Times bestseller list. Mom." "You're number 6. I dropped the towel. "Number 6, she nodded, eyes wide. "It says an honest, tender cookbook blending homegrown recipes with personal essays about motherhood, marriage, and resilience. Mom, they put your name right under Ina Garten." I sat down on the laundry bench. I couldn't speak. My hands trembled. And somewhere in the middle of my shock, I remembered Nina's voice, that glassy laugh echoing in our dining room. "You're just a housewife." Oh, honey, not anymore. And certainly not for long. The news spread faster than I could have imagined. James found out not from me, but from his coworker who casually mentioned, "Hey, your wife's a bestseller now?" He came home that night holding a copy of the New York Times like it was a relic. There it was, page 5, my name, my book, my photo. He looked at me across the kitchen counter, something new flickering in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, not angry, just stunned. I shrugged. I wanted to see if it was real first. He nodded slowly, then pulled me into a quiet, breathless hug. "It's real," he whispered, "and you did it." Still, I kept things humble. I didn't post anything flashy. I didn't update my social media or throw a party. It was enough knowing I had created something of worth, something no one could ever take away from me. But the universe has a funny sense of timing. Because 2 weeks later, James received an invitation to another company gathering. This time, a catered holiday dinner hosted at Nina's house. I didn't want to go. I really didn't. But James asked me gently, "You should be seen," he said. "You've earned it." So I dressed carefully. I didn't wear anything dramatic, just a soft burgundy wrap dress and the necklace my mother had given me on my wedding day. I carried a copy of my book in my purse, not for show, just in case someone genuinely asked about it. I didn't want to gloat, but part of me knew. Part of me was waiting for that moment. When we arrived, Nina opened the door in stilettos and a red silk blouse that looked like it cost more than my kitchen appliances. She greeted James first, then me. "Oh, Caroline," she said with her practiced smile. "So glad you could make it." Her voice had that same syrupy undertone, sweetened for guests, sharpened with judgment. We mingled for a while, small talk, tiny appetizers. I stayed mostly quiet, letting others lead the conversation. I could feel Nina watching me, waiting for me to fade into the background like usual. But then, it happened. Someone at the bar turned to me and said, "Hey, aren't you the one who wrote, 'You're Just a Housewife'? My wife loved that book. She said it made her cry into a pie crust." Heads turned. Nina froze mid-pour. I blinked, smiled. "Yes, that's me." A few people gathered closer. Another man chimed in, "You hit the Times list, didn't you?" I nodded modestly. "Number 1 last week." And then came the moment I'll never forget. Nina gave a light, airy laugh, like it was all amusing. "Wait, that little cookbook you self-published? That's the one?" I looked at her dead in the eye and replied, calm as ever, "Yes, that one." Over 300,000 copies sold, but I'm flattered you remember it at all. The room went still. Someone coughed. Another muttered, "Wow." Nina's smile faltered, just a flicker, like a crack in a mirror. She raised her glass slowly, trying to recover. "Well, guess there's hope for all of us housewives then." That was her jab, her last swing, and I gave her my softest smile as I said, "Hope was never the issue. Respect was." James blinked beside me. Someone let out a quiet damn. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to, because in that moment, Surrounded by polished people in designer shoes and curated lives, I had more power in my silence than all of them had in their noise. And Nina? She never laughed like that around me again. After that dinner party, something shifted, not just in how others saw me, but in how I saw me. Strangers emailed me. Bookstores started calling. A local talk show invited me to speak on rediscovering identity after motherhood. I politely declined the show, but not because I was afraid. I just wasn't ready to explain on TV what had taken me decades to figure out in private. And yet, the question haunted me at night. Why did one laugh, one comment, crack something open so deep inside me? I knew the answer, because I had spent years being erased. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, subtle, like a tablecloth being pulled inch by inch off the edge of a table until the dishes start shaking and falling one by one. It started when I left my teaching job to stay home after Ava was born. Then came PTA meetings, birthday cupcakes, folded socks, and calendars filled with everyone else's plans but mine. I told myself I was lucky, that this was a privilege, that love meant putting others first. And it did. It still does. But no one ever told me that putting others first for 20 years might mean forgetting what you looked like in the mirror. When I was in my 20s, I wrote poetry on napkins. I dreamed of writing a book, any book. I'd scribble lines between feeding times and doctor's appointments, always with a sigh. One day, when the kids are older, when things slow down. But things don't slow down. They shift, they stretch. And sometimes you wake up one day and realize you've become the background in your own story. That's why that laugh, the one Nina let out when she called me just a housewife, hit so hard. Because a part of me had believed it, until now, until this. And here's the irony. The very role I was mocked for, wife, mother, homemaker, became the foundation for everything I wrote. It was my material, my strength, my truth. My readers weren't looking for fancy. They didn't care about Michelin stars or truffle oil. They wanted to know how to feed 3 kids on $5 and still make it feel like love. They wanted a reason to get out of bed on grief-heavy mornings and bake banana bread just to smell something warm. They wanted to feel seen, and suddenly, I was the mirror. Bookstores began requesting signings. I did one at the local library, the same one where I used to take Ava for story time. I wore a soft green blouse and my favorite boots. The line wrapped around the room. One woman, probably my age, clutched the book to her chest and said, with tears in her eyes, "You reminded me that I matter." And that's when I realized this wasn't just about proving Nina wrong anymore. It was about proving women right. Every woman who gave up a dream for diapers. Every woman who answered to mom before her own name. Every woman who carried a family without anyone asking how heavy that actually was. We were never invisible. We were just waiting for someone to say, "Tell me your recipe." Start from the beginning. And this book, it was mine. 6 months after my book hit #1, I was invited to keynote a women's leadership brunch at a downtown conference center. I almost said no. Public speaking wasn't something I'd ever seen myself doing. I'd spent decades letting others have the mic, letting louder voices steer the room while I cleaned up the dishes after. But then I remembered that quiet promise I'd made to myself the night I typed the title. You're just a housewife. This wasn't about being loud. This was about being heard. So I said yes. I wore the same burgundy wrap dress from Nina's dinner party. Added a pair of earrings I bought with my first royalty check. No stylist, no speechwriter, just me, a podium, and a yellow notebook, the same one where I had first outlined the chapters. The room was filled with women, young, old, corporate, homemakers, dreamers. Some had babies in strollers, others had bags under their eyes and clipboards in their hands. I looked out at them and felt a quiet kind of courage rise in my chest. I opened the notebook, cleared my throat, and began. I was told I was just a housewife, like it was an apology, like it was a limitation, like it was a dead end. But let me tell you something about housewives. We are logisticians. We are therapists. We are economists, chefs, emergency planners, and human resource departments wrapped in soft clothes and scarred hands. And when we choose to write, we don't just write recipes. We write blueprints for survival. The room went still. No phones, no murmurs. Just breathe. I told them about Nina. I didn't use her name, but they knew her. Every woman does. She exists in every office, every school function, every dinner table, whispering doubt in the disguise of a joke. And then I told them the truth. She didn't just laugh at me. She laughed at all of us. And now, she sells real estate, and I sell out stadiums of readers who find hope in my sweet potato casserole. The laughter that rose wasn't cruel. It was triumphant. Women nodded. Some clapped. One woman in the front row wiped a tear. I ended with this. They called me just a housewife, but what they didn't know is that was the starter. Now I'm the whole damn meal. When I stepped down from that stage, there was no spotlight, no fireworks, just a slow, steady standing ovation that felt more real than anything I'd ever experienced in my life. Later that evening, I received a message from someone I didn't expect. Nina. It was short, just 2 lines. I read your book. I was wrong. I stared at the message for a long time, and then I deleted it, not out of spite, but because I no longer needed her apology to feel whole. Respect earned in silence doesn't need permission, and mine had already arrived. It's funny how a life can change without changing much at all. I still make dinner most nights, still wipe down the counters, still scribble notes in the margins of my cookbooks when the cinnamon feels too bold or the rosemary sings a little louder than expected. James still forgets to take the trash out on Tuesdays. Ava still calls me at midnight for advice she pretends not to need. But something fundamental has shifted. Me, the way I walk into a room, the way I speak without shrinking, the way I take up space without apologizing. For the first time in my adult life, I don't just exist in the service of others. I exist in the full, bright clarity of being someone with a name that matters. Caroline Moore, author, cook, mother. And no longer someone who needs to prove her worth over a plate of lamb or a perfect pie crust. Sometimes readers ask me what my favorite recipe in the book is. It's not the chocolate cake that healed my marriage, not the chili that brought the neighbors together during a blackout, not even the blueberry muffins that Ava once called soft like a hug. No, it's the one on page 143. It's titled simply, The Day I Remembered Who I Was. The ingredients are basic. 1 part courage, 2 parts silence, a heaping scoop of forgotten dreams, a dash of fury, and a slow simmer of faith. The instructions? Write. Even when no one's watching. Speak. Even if your voice shakes, stand. Even if the ground beneath you tells you not to. And serve it all with grace, but never with apology. It's not a dish you can eat, but it's one that feeds you for life. And to every woman who's ever been told she's just a housewife, darling, you're the reason the house stands. They laughed once. They don't laugh now. They read. They quote. They ask for signed copies. And sometimes, when I'm at the grocery store or picking up coffee, someone will stop me and say, "Are you Caroline Moore?" And I'll smile, tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, and reply, "Yes, I'm the one who turned leftovers into a legacy." And in that moment, between the blinking cash register and the sound of bagged groceries, I don't feel invisible. I feel seen. I feel full. I feel home.